Hey everyone, my name's tomatoanus, also known as Big Bush Little Mushroom, and this is an any % speedrun of Dark Souls. This run is performed by Regole, a top runner for the game who also helped me write the script to make sure it's all as accurate as possible. If you'd prefer to watch either this run without commentary or Regole's current personal best, they're both uploaded on his channel and there are links to them in the description. Also, this is any % so glitches are allowed, and I know some of you might not be into that, so I've also linked the current any % glitchless record for Dark Souls Remastered by K1666 in the description. It's worth noting that the glitchless run is on the remastered version as opposed to the original game like Regole's run in this video. That's simply because there isn't really a glitchless speedrunning scene for the original Dark Souls, but the remastered version is pretty similar to the original and has a good handful of documented glitchless runs, so it's the best place to go if you want glitchless content instead. So if you're unfamiliar with Dark Souls, how? But seriously, if you're unfamiliar with it, it's an action role-playing game with a reputation for being incredibly punishing. A core mechanic of the game is exploration and proceeding with caution through a large and continuous open world. Littered throughout the world are bonfires that serve as checkpoints as well as difficult enemies and bosses. The goal of the game is to make your way through the world, accomplishing a couple major tasks along the way, which include ringing the 2 bells of awakening, obtaining the Lord Vessel, filling it with the souls of the 4 lords, and defeating the final boss. These major tasks also serve as the main things you have to accomplish in this speedrun to be able to complete the game and will serve as our to-do list throughout the video. With all that being covered, let's get into the run.
Come on, Snake Eyes! Hey, I'm Chicago Guy and I'm at a baseball game, but it's super loud so I can't hear anything, and I'm gambling, but I forgot my dice at home so I'm using peanut shells instead. Even though I'm distracted and it's super loud, I can still keep up with the game by listening to it on my phone with a pair of these. Wait, not those, these. Raycons are shaking up the electronics game with their wireless earbuds that start at half the price of other premium brands. These everyday earbuds last 6 hours on a single charge with easy Bluetooth pairing and a compact design. Raycon offers multiple color options for their earbuds with a choice of fit options. Raycon was co-founded by Ray J, the guy we all know from that thing. And also, you see this guy? Yeah, that's the guy from The Hangover. He's into Raycon as well. Click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/anus to get 15% off your Raycon purchase. Plus, Raycon has a 45-day free return policy, so you always have that safety net to fall back onto if you aren't a fan. Again, that's buyraycon.com/anus.
So before the run even starts, we have things important to the run happening. First thing that we have to talk about is that Dark Souls is a multiplayer game. It's a bit unique in how multiplayer is implemented, and if you're not familiar, the way it works is you can find signs left by other players in the world and interact with them to summon said player to your game to help you defeat enemies. Because of this, as well as things like being able to receive Estus flask refills from other players' worlds when they kindle bonfires, it's mandatory that all Dark Souls speedruns are performed offline if you want your run to be recognized on the leaderboards. Normally, you could just put Steam into offline mode and start up the game then, but speedrunners utilize Steam's controller profile feature to swap control schemes mid-run for a glitch called prompt swap, and if you're in offline mode, then those control schemes are not memorized and you have to set them up before every attempt. This is super annoying, so the Dark Souls speedrunning community uses a custom DLL file that flips a bit and makes the game launch offline while still being signed in online on Steam. Right before Regole creates his character, you can see a pop-up on screen about how the game is being launched offline. Next, choosing between playing as male or female does matter. There are a couple differences between the two, like females having a different one-handed idle animation which affects how some glitches are performed in different runs, but the difference between the two that affects the any % run is your acceleration when sprinting. When you sprint in this game, males accelerate slower than females, so it takes longer for us to reach our top speed. However, males decelerate slower than females, meaning we take longer to slow down when we stop sprinting. We're going to be using a weapon toggling strat throughout the run where as soon as you start sprinting, you toggle your weapon, which causes males to accelerate at the same rate as females. It's because we can do this that we play as the male, since we get a fast acceleration with the weapon toggling strat and a slow deceleration since we're male. The third thing before this run is that we choose the Pyromancer class. There's multiple reasons for this. First off, we want the armor that comes with the Pyromancer class. Not only is it incredibly fashion forward, but it helps us execute a glitch called air rolls, which, believe it or not, lets us roll in the air. In order to perform air rolls, you have to have a really precise equip load, which is the weight of the items we have equipped. It just so happens that the Pyromancer armor is perfect for getting that equip load. We'll get more into how air rolls work later in the run though. Another reason why we pick Pyromancer is that we start with both Fireball, which is a spell, and a Pyromancy Flame, which allows us to cast spells and we actually pick up in the starting area of the game. Both of these are used to perform a Wrong Warp later in the run, which again, we'll get to it later. Lastly, for gift, we pick the Black Fire Bombs, which we're going to use to kill the first boss faster, saving about 10 seconds. With that all being covered, now we can start the run. Right away, Regole blocks with his weapon as he finishes the door opening animation because blocking out of animations and into sprinting saves 3 frames. There's actually a bit more to this, but we'll get to it later. In the top left corner, watch Regole's stamina hit practically 0 the moment he starts climbing a ladder in a few seconds. Regole times this out and does it on purpose to get as much out of his stamina bar before entering an interaction point at the ladder, and you'll see this a lot throughout the run, trying to get the most out of our stamina bar and then letting it fill back up while we perform actions where sprinting isn't an option. Regole got naked while climbing the ladder so we get a faster roll, and opened his menu real quick here to set himself up for a glitch later on that involves a merchant, but we'll talk about that soon. Regole stands and looks in a specific spot and yeets 3 firebombs before rolling away from an attack and tossing 2 more firebombs to take out the tutorial boss in the game, the Asylum Demon. We can't leave right away since defeating the Asylum Demon first try doesn't give us the big Pilgrim's Key, and we instead have to go talk to Oscar, who will give it to us in addition to the Estus Flask, but also we can't leave because we still have to pick up our Pyromancy Flame upstairs. At the end of this hallway, we have to backhand slap a dude who always blocks the doorway, and then when entering a fog gate at the end of this hallway, Regole will unequip the humanity that he just picked up so that when we get the Estus Flask, it'll go into our first item slot. Around this corner, Regole will bait out a boulder to be able to talk to Oscar to get the keys to leave and the Estus Flask. After sending the message to Oscar that we don't want to talk, we run up the stairs and do a roll to aggro a hollow early so they don't block us in a second, and also pick up our Pyromancy Flame that I mentioned earlier when creating the character. Dark Souls speedruns are timed with in-game time, which being in the main menu when loading screens don't count towards. So once Regole jumps down and starts opening up the big door to exit, he quits to the main menu and reloads the game, which skips the door opening animation, saving time overall. When we load back in, we'll approach the cliffside to be taken away by the big burb, and Regole will pull up the key settings menu, which will stay up during the cutscene that we skip. Normally when we arrive in Firelink Shrine after the cutscene, there's a pop-up that prevents us from sprinting for a few seconds, but having the key settings menu up prevents the pop-up from, well, popping up, allowing us to sprint immediately. Our stay in Firelink Shrine will be short-lived, as we'll sprint past enemies and make our way to the Undead Burg, where we're going to speak to a merchant who has the very original name of Undead Merchant. On our way there, the dragon from Shrek is going to land right in front of us at one point, but by rolling at just the right time, we can escape the stagger that we normally get put into and go straight through the dragon from Shrek's foot. At the merchant, we're going to perform the glitch called Prompt Swap. Before the run, I mentioned how runners make use of Steam's controller profile setup feature, and that's for this glitch. Regole has it set up so that when he presses select on his controller, it swaps controller profiles to one where the X button on his controller inputs as a mouse left click. Near the start of the run, I also mentioned how Regole opened a menu while opening a door to position his cursor at a certain part in the inventory menu, and that's for this glitch. Sorry, I have to pause the run real quick to explain this all because it's important. The location where Regole positioned his cursor is over an arrow that you can click on to switch from one item category tab to another. We have several items we're going to buy with the souls we've earned, but we don't have enough souls to buy the residence key, which we want to get. To purchase the key, even though we don't have enough souls, Regole is going to hover over the orange guidance soapstone, which is in a different tab than the residence key. Regole is then going to press A on his controller to select the soapstone at the same time as pressing X on his controller. This inputs a mouse click on the arrow to swap tabs, switching the menu over to the tab with the key in it, as the A input is also registered. The orange guidance soapstone and residence key have the same index, and switching between the two tabs like this at the same time as pressing A lets us purchase the residence key even though we don't have enough souls, with the game still trying to spend 1,000 souls on the purchase and reducing our soul count to 0. I know that the still on screen makes it look like we're purchasing the bottomless box for 1,000 souls, but I can assure you that we're purchasing the residence key for what's essentially 180 souls. See how right here we have 180 souls and the residence key is on top? Well, here's a still from right after Regole clicks OK on that 1,000 soul purchase. You can see the resonance key is gone, and we went from 180 souls to 0. Okay, let's see how quickly this plays out. Regole is first going to buy 3 arrows, a rapier, a reinforced club, and a bow, and then performs the prompt swap right after. Now you can see why I had to pause. After the merchant, Regole is now making his way to use the resonance key we just purchased, which we bought because it opens a door that leads to a chest with gold pine resin in it. First though, on our way there, we absolutely demolished this dude right here with a lethal kick. So gold pine resin applies lightning damage to our weapon, and lightning damage just wrecks the upcoming boss, the Taurus demon. Before we can get to the Taurus demon, we had to play Ring Around the Rosie real quick with these hollows at the door we opened with the resonance key, and now we can actually grab the gold pine resin. With the resin in hand, Regole makes a cute little leaping skip over a railway and then plays a quick round of Donkey Kong by jumping over a flaming barrel. When we traverse the fog gate to enter the boss fight, Regole equips the reinforced club we purchased to use in the fight, as well as the bow and arrows for future use. Normally, the sequence for the Taurus demon fight is to initiate with a jumping heavy attack, followed by a regular attack and a firebomb to stagger the demon. This buys us enough time to regen some stamina and then just unload on the demon with regular attacks to wipe it out quickly. Unfortunately though, the Taurus demon had other plans this run, who after seeing how powerful we are, decides to just end the fight on his own terms by backing off the wall we're on. This happening is actually pretty rare and a bit unlucky in this case. If you get it to happen early in the fight, it's good because it'll save some time, but in this run it happened just as we were about to finish up the fight, so waiting for the demon to fall and health bar to diminish actually loses us time, as it then takes longer for the fog gate to disappear. Here we bump into the dragon from Shrek again, and Regole uses an Estus flask in this alcove not for healing purposes, but rather to time out when he can run back onto the bridge and not be damaged by the fire. Regole then shoots the dragon from Shrek with an arrow, applies a foreign substance to his weapon, sorry Manfred, and chops off the dragon from Shrek's tail in 2 hits to get the Drake sword. When opening the gate that the dragon from Shrek was guarding, Regole will do some menuing since it's a fixed animation, and drops the demon's great hammer, repositions the Drake sword for an upcoming glitch called Move Swap, remember that name, and equips the rapier we bought earlier. Here, Regole is going to run past a bunch of enemies and eventually quit out to the main menu to reset the enemies that are aggroed onto him in preparation for a skip called Sen's Gate Skip. This is a trick that skips the gate to Sen's Fortress, which usually requires us to ring the 2 bells of awakening to open. After the quit out and loading back in from the menu, Regole is going to aggro a nearby hollow and lure it to a stairway. Regole will stand in a specific spot next to a pillar to set up his movement, and when the hollow gets close, Regole is going to run up to the next pillar, parry, and riposte the hollow's attack. This will clip Regole slightly out of bounds and cause for the character to hit an invisible plane that triggers the death camera that looks down on the character from a bird's eye view. Note that the plane we're hitting only activates the death camera and doesn't actually kill us. There's a plane right below it that actually is the death plane that would kill us, and if you stand too far down on the stairs and perform the riposte, then you'll hit that and die. The reason why we do this camera trick is because when you're in the death camera, unloaded assets don't load and loaded assets don't disappear. The location where we perform the riposte is just close enough to Sen's Fortress where the path to it is loaded, so we're able to walk there, but the gate itself blocking entrance to Sen's Fortress is unloaded. The hollow we riposted is still alive and booking it after us, but Regole is decent at the game and was able to blindly navigate down some stairs to rest at a bonfire to reset the hollow and level up our dexterity to 12, allowing us to properly wield the Drake sword and rapier. Regole now runs down the final path towards Sen's Fortress, and when he crosses the threshold of where the gate would be, Regole will jump to a specific spot so he can menu while still moving forward, and quit out to reset the camera and load us back into the fortress. Sen's Fortress has a ton of moving obstacles that run on cycles, so by quitting out and loading back in at a specific spot, our movement lines up just right with hitting the cycles when we have gaps to run through all the obstacles. Coming up is the glitch I mentioned earlier, Move Swap, which may be the most important piece of tech in the run. Move Swap is a glitch that allows us to attack with one weapon while having the attack animation of another weapon. In this case, we're going to be using the Drake sword to attack, which is a super strong weapon for this point in the game, but with the attack animation of the rapier, which is super fast to attack with. Gonna pause again real quick to explain this since it's so important. Dark Souls runs on an action queue system where if you attempt to perform an action like using an item or two-handing a weapon during an animation, then that action is queued up and actually performed after the ongoing animation finishes. Additionally, the bow is the only weapon in the game that can be equipped in your left hand and two-handed by pressing the hotkey to toggle between one-handed and two-handed grip. Move swap is performed by abusing these two features. Regole has his bow out in his left hand and will jump to begin an animation. The moment his feet hit the ground, he's going to queue up two-handing the bow, and as soon as he's done that, he'll menu to swap out the bow for the Drake Sword. Once the landing animation is then complete, the character will be two-handing the Drake Sword while it's equipped in the left hand. As I mentioned earlier, this will give the Drake Sword the attack animations of the rapier. The way this works is that the bow doesn't have info for rolling, running, or plunging attacks, so the game takes that info from the other hand, giving the bow the rolling, running, and plunging attack of the rapier. Because we swap out the bow for the Drake Sword will then be the one borrowing that info from the rapier. The rapier has a running attack that hits twice, which is super strong, especially when you use big heavy weapons. Now that that's all explained, let's see Regole actually perform move swap. Blink and you'll miss it though. Now you can see why I had to pause the run again. So now that we have move swap set up, Regole continues through the fortress doing some menuing while entering a fog gate to clean up his inventory and quits out while running up some stairs in a moment. That's because a boulder is rolling down the stairs and is about to hit us, but quitting out resets the boulder's position, letting us make it up the stairs without being hit. This quit out was also done in a specific location to make sure that we continue to make all of the cycles with the moving obstacles throughout the rest of Sen's fortress. Sen's fortress as a whole, while the dismay of many first-time players for its use of traps and gotcha moments, is one of the easier parts of the speedrun and is pretty comfy for seasoned runners of the game. In about 12 seconds, Regole will traverse the fog gate at the top of the interior, and there he'll equip the dark sign from his inventory, which he's going to use later in the run to return to a bonfire in exchange for all our souls and humanity. And again, Regole does the bulk of his menuing throughout the run when the character is performing animations like climbing up ladders and going through fog gates, because the game continues to run while you're paused, so we progress through the animation while still accomplishing things, and we don't have to waste time later on menuing when we could be doing something better. So before the run started, I briefly mentioned how we play as male because males decelerate slower in this game and females accelerate faster, but by toggling our weapon as we start sprinting, we can play as male and accelerate as fast as females. We've been doing that a ton throughout the run so far, but now that we have move swap set up, we can't toggle our weapon to get the fast acceleration because that will break move swap and we'd have to perform it again. It turns out though that any upper body animations you do in sprinting accelerate you, including blocking, which is what Regole does in this outdoor stretch to continue to get the fast acceleration while playing as male. Blocking does inhibit our stamina regen though, so we prefer to toggle throughout the run when we can. Here we're at what's debatably either the hardest or second hardest fight in the run, the Iron Golem. This guy is beefy, and even with our move swap glitch would take a while to fully chip away his health, so Regole manipulates the Iron Golem to stand long ways with the bridge. Regole deals the 400 damage necessary to stagger the Iron Golem, then after an additional 200 damage, the Iron Golem will fall backwards onto his rump, which causes him to fall off the bridge. After the golem takes the Taurus's way out, Regole interacts with a small orange ring to travel to Anor Londo via some Batwing demons in a cutscene that we immediately skip. Now in Anor Londo, it's a good time to mention something that will come into play in a minor way in a second and in a major way later in the run, so absorb the upcoming info like a sponge. In Dark Souls, there's a concept referred to as stable ground. Stable ground, for the most part, is what it sounds like and what you would intuitively imagine it to be in a video game. Ground that isn't moving that you can stand on and walk on. Most places you can walk in this game are stable ground, with things like elevators and air not being stable ground. While you walk around, the game is constantly updating your position based on what the most recent stable ground you stood on was. If you're to then quit out of the game and load back in, you respawn back at your most recent stable ground position. Right here, Regole attempted to leap down onto a narrow walkway but slightly missed, and he quit out and reloaded the game while he was falling. This respawns him back at his most recent stable ground position, which is the edge of the ledge that he leaped off of before he slid off the walkway, which pretty much just undoes the fall and the fact we were about to die from falling. As I just said, this comes into play in a major way later in the run, so remember this stable ground concept. After performing a fancy jump and topping off his health for safety, Regole ran through a broken window to enter a chapel. Here he climbs up into the rafters, praying that none of the painting guardians get in his way or hit him with throwing knives. This is why Regole has his rapier out. In case the guardians do get in his way, he can just attack them real quick to get them out of his way. Luckily in this run, the painting guardians were pretty cooperative. Regole is then going to jump down from the rafters and traverse a fog gate, after which he'll equip the Drake Sword in preparation for an upcoming Silver Knight. We have a few moments of rest here as Regole does some running, so I'd like to remind you, as always, that no feeling is final. Please, please, please remember that there are brighter days ahead. I know that at times things feel hopeless, things feel like you're in a rut, and there's no way to escape it. I can assure you that those feelings of despair are not permanent and do not define the rest of your life. Even if things just feel overwhelming, no matter what happens, there is a tomorrow. Back to the run, if you played through this part of the game before, you know that after running up this huge staircase, you have to run up some narrow pathways with 2 Silver Knights just raining down umbrella-sized arrows at you. So, in addition to using audio cues to know whether or not he has to run in circles and dodge giant arrows from the knights, or lightning bolts from the Batwing demons he's running past, Regole also has to worry about whether or not the upcoming Silver Knight that we're going to run past decides to switch from his bow to melee attack, or decide to stick with shooting arrows at us even though we're right in his face. This is what the Drake Sword is for, because if the knight decides to stay in ranged mode, as he does in this run, then you can actually say "excuse me" with it and he'll move out of the way. So we're going to be getting our main weapon for the rest of the run in a moment, which is the Dragon Tooth. In order to wield it two-handed, we need to have at least 27 strength, which thankfully we have enough souls to achieve due to the Iron Golem fight, plus a few extra souls that we dump into endurance levels since it's always nice to have extra endurance. Also, some of you may be asking why we're leveling up at this bonfire as opposed to the one at the start of Anor Londo, and that's simply because this bonfire is faster to access. From the bonfire, we now make our way to actually grab the Dragon Tooth. Remember in Sen's Fortress how we equip the Dark Sign, which lets us return to a bonfire at the cost of all our souls and humanity? Well, this is what that's for, because as soon as Regole grabs the Dragon Tooth from the chest down here, he's going to use the Dark Sign to be brought back to the bonfire we just used. We can now make our way to Ornstein and Smo, utilizing a skip by hopping over a railing on the stairway, skipping a huge section of Anor Londo. Regole called this a cute skip that a lot of people figured out casually, but I never did, and that makes me feel bad, so please let me know in the comments if you figured it out on your own, because at this point I'm just desperate to find someone else who this skip is new to. In a moment, Regole causes me to feel actual pain in my knees by doing something called a toggle escape, where he falls off a ledge here and cancels the stagger from landing by toggling out of two-handing his weapon and then spamming roll. Regole performs move swap here to equip the Dragon Tooth before traversing the fog gate in a specific spot to make Ornstein's openers more consistent. Ornstein can perform several different openers, and in this run he attempts to charge at us, which is the best option and has us run to the left to dodge, lock on, and attack. We focus on taking out Ornstein first because he's easier to isolate, and also fighting Super Smo is much easier than Super Ornstein. Things get a little shaky in this fight with Regole getting hit, which allowed Smo to catch up and make things more complicated, but by running around to dodge and also continually performing the rapier running attack to get 2 quick Dragon Tooth hits in on Ornstein, he's quickly taken care of. The powered up Smo fight is even easier, with each running attack from the Dragon Tooth hitting twice, dealing enough damage to perpetually stagger and stunlock Smo, pretty much turning this fight into a Hasanabi stream. I know that Regole makes this fight look incredibly easy and an absolute cakewalk, but this fight is by far the biggest run killer and is the fight that goes toe to toe with the Iron Golem for the title of hardest fight in the run. So now that we've cleared out Ornstein and Smo, we can obtain the Lord Vessel from Guinevere, who camps out in a room upstairs with 2 huge doors. After quitting out to the main menu to skip the door opening animation, Regole is going to shoot her in the chest with an arrow to kill her. This skips all the dialogue with her, saving about 8 seconds in the process. You do have to be careful with where you shoot her though, because the arrow will just fly straight through a lot of her model and not hit her. Regole uses the Dark Sign again as the sparkles from her death animation disappear, which perfectly times it out so that we receive the Lord Vessel as the screen fades to black. Now that we have the Lord Vessel, we can warp between bonfires, so we now warp immediately to Firelink Shrine. We'll then rest at Firelink Shrine so that it's our last rested at bonfire, and warp to Undead Burg. So normally in the game, now that we have the Lord Vessel, we'd go and fight the 4 lords to collect their souls, which we'd put into the Lord Vessel to access the final boss. We have a trick for skipping straight to the final boss, which is called a wrong warp, and we'll get to that later, but that means we can cross the 4 lords off our to-do list. Unfortunately though, while the Bells of Awakening are usually thought of to be what opens up Sen's Fortress, which is why I crossed it off earlier, it also is required to be able to access Firelink Altar, which is where we both place the Lord Vessel and enter the final boss area, so we actually do have to ring the bells still. We delayed ringing the bells until now because by doing so, then we can fight the required bosses with the Dragon Tooth as opposed to the Drake Sword. This is why we're at the Undead Burg now, where after dodging some Baldur Knights and Hollows here, Regole will climb up a ladder and perform move swap when finishing climbing the ladder. Normally Regole jumps to begin an animation to move swap during, but you can actually do it with any animation. It's just jumping is one of the easier ones to do on command, but exiting a ladder is also easy to perform move swap with. Regole will now enter the arena for the Bell Gargoyle fight and demonstrate just how fast the fight is with Dragon Tooth and why it's worth it to wait to do these fights until now. Yeah, it's kinda stupid. When we exit the fight, Regole climbs a ladder and begins menuing to set himself up for that glitch called air rolls that I mentioned before the run that has to do with the Pyromancer clothes. Air rolls let us pretty much just roll in air to avoid fall damage. To perform an air roll, our equip load has to be above 25% and either below or equal to 25.000088%. By equipping the Drake Sword, Bow, and Pyromancer outfit, our equip load is just below 25%, and the Pyromancer outfit gives us that awkward .000088 value on the end of our equip load, which is one of the reasons why we chose to play as the Pyromancer like I mentioned before the run. Gonna pause again real quick. Regole also equipped and unequipped the hilt so that it moved to the top of the inventory in the first item slot. When we have the hilt equipped, our equip load is going to be exactly 25.000088%, allowing for us to perform air rolls, but that also puts us above 25% equip load, which means we're in the second weight class division, which is referred to as mid-roll, where we don't sprint as fast. By having the hilt at the top of the inventory in the first slot though, we can have it unequipped and stay in the fast sprinting weight class, and then quickly equip it again when we need to air roll. So after ringing the first Bell of Awakening, Regole used the Dark Sign to return to Firelink Shrine, which is where we are now. This is where we're going to perform Blighttown Skip, which is where we'll perform some air rolls. There's a lot of steps to this skip, so I'm going to go over them all individually first. After that, we can then watch the skip performed in real time. Regole will run down to the elevator below Firelink Shrine, where he'll position himself against a wall to prepare for a clip out of bounds called a transition clip. He'll snuggle himself up into a corner and look at a specific visual cue on the ground to set up his angle correctly, then cue up an arrow shot and roll to move cleanly from his current precise position onto the elevator. This will update his most recent stable ground position to be the very edge of the elevator as he was rolling onto it. See, I told you stable ground would be coming back in a major way. As the elevator goes down, Regole will backstep to lock himself into a corner so that when it reaches the bottom, he can roll out of the elevator and barely be in the New Londo area at the bottom and then immediately backstep. This puts us in New Londo for only a frame or two, and then when Regole quits out of the game and loads back in, the game will load New Londo first, even though our stable position is at the top of the elevator shaft, meaning that no ground is loaded in and will fall through the floor. This is a long fall, but we're able to survive. This is because for some reason, if you're in the stand-up animation and begin to fall due to there being no floor beneath you, then when you land, you don't die immediately. Like your health stays full for a few moments before draining. Regole takes advantage of this by quitting out the moment we splat on an invisible surface, which will update our stable ground position to where we landed. When we load back in, we'll still be full health and have avoided the fall damage. Regole will then aim at another visual cue to get the correct angle and backstep, then roll backwards to land on a narrow, invisible balance beam of a ledge that's referred to as a seam. There he'll then drop down onto a platform where he'll start to walk along another seam. This seam is about a pixel wide and takes a ton of practice to get good at. As Regole's stamina starts to run out, he'll quickly equip the hilt to be at the proper equip load for air rolls, then slide off the face of the seam and begin rolling while in air. It's not just spamming roll though, it's rolling at the perfect time so your invincibility frames from your roll are active the moment you touch the ground, allowing you to survive the fall. All of these glitches and strats combined are what make up Blighttown Skip, which will bring us down to Queeleg's domain, saving around 40 to 45 seconds overall. Okay, now that we know the individual pieces, we can watch them all together to see the full Blighttown Skip. Let's see how it plays out. Hi again. That may have seemed like a long skip to perform, but I can assure you there was no way to get all of that explanation into that time without cutting out pertinent info, which is why I felt the need to pause. Before and while traversing the fog gate, Regole did a move swap to set up the Dragon Tooth and also unequipped all the Pyromancer armor, so we're in the lightest weight class again and can run quickly. The fight against Queeleg is mostly straightforward, with just going to places around her body where you know she can't hit you. She is a bit random with how she can attack, but nothing that isn't totally manageable, as Regole shows here. Once we take her out, we're going to ring the second Bell of Awakening and then use a homeward bone to travel back to Firelink Shrine because we actually want to keep our souls this time. As I mentioned before, we need to ring both bells to be able to access Firelink Altar, which is where we enter the final area of the game. Again though, we normally need to defeat the 4 lords to enter that area, but we're going to skip that thanks to performing a wrong warp. Before we can do a wrong warp though, we have to talk to Coconut Head in Firelink Shrine and join his covenant so that we can purchase the homeward spell from him, as well as a Thorolun talisman. We'll then begin the process of setting up and performing the wrong warp. I know that we just paused for like 3 minutes and 14 seconds to explain Blighttown Skip, but we have to do it one last time to explain the wrong warp. I promise this is the last time we'll pause this run, but it is so necessary to explain this fully because it's so insane and fascinating and also important for the run. Regole will leap down to the Firelink Altar, place the Lord Vessel, rest at it so it's our most recent bonfire, then attune homeward, and then warp to the Undead Parish. Regole will then have his Pyromancy Flame equipped on the left hand, Talisman equipped on the right hand, and both Fireball and Homeward equipped at the top of our inventory in that order. So every area in Dark Souls has a sort of default location. This is a spot you'll spawn at if anything goes wrong, like getting stuck and whatnot, and each area has a spot that was chosen by the developer. If you've watched my videos breaking down Fallout speedruns, it's the same concept as a COC point. So the Firelink Altar has these big doors in it. Behind these doors is the Kiln of the First Flame, which is the final area in the game. The default location you spawn at for the Firelink Altar is right behind those huge doors. So if we're able to force the game to spawn us at that default location, we skip opening the doors and can go straight to the final boss, which is where the wrong warp comes into play. When we go to perform the wrong warp, our most recently rested at bonfire is the Lord Vessel. That means if we were to use the Homeward spell without any shenanigans, we'd spawn back at the Lord Vessel. Homeward has a long cast animation where normally when you cast it, you're stuck in that animation and can't move until the animation ends, but by that point, you'll have already loaded back at your last bonfire. However, Regole is going to perform a glitch that will allow him to cast Homeward with the cast animation of Fireball, which has a very quick recovery animation. This is done by having Fireball chosen between the two spells and pressing L1 to cast with the Pyromancy Flame. Then, on the same frame as pressing L1 to cast Fireball with the Flame, Regole also presses up on his D-pad to swap from Fireball to Homeward. Then, on the very next frame, Regole presses R1 to cast Homeward with the Talisman, which is equipped in our right hand. This series of actions causes Homeward to be casted with the incredibly short animation of Fireball. This begins the process of us being warped back to the Firelink altar to the Lord Vessel. Because the animation was so short though, we can run around for a second or two before being transported. In this brief window, Regole will rest at the bonfire directly in front of us at the Undead Parish. This will update our most recent bonfire to the one in Undead Parish as opposed to the one in Firelink Altar. The game then doesn't know where to load us in at Firelink Altar, since the bonfire we most recently rested at isn't in Firelink Altar, it's in Undead Parish. This is what causes the game to instead load us in at the default location for Firelink Altar, which is behind those huge doors and inside the final area of the game, the Kiln of the First Flame. It all happens super quick. Alright, let's get to it. So here's Regole purchasing Homeward and the Talisman from Coconut Head. Now that he has those, he's making his way to leap into Mustache Snake's pit to enter the Firelink Altar. Here he places the Lord Vessel, rests at it so it's our most recent bonfire, attunes Homeward, and travels to the Undead Parish. That's where Regole actually performs the casting of Homeward with the Fireball animation and rests at the bonfire to update it to our most recent bonfire, and then loads in on the other side of the door at the Kiln of the First Flame, fully completing the wrong warp. The wrong warp saves a ton of time, with the any % no wrong warp record being almost a full 18 minutes slower than the run with the wrong warp. From here on out, the run is mostly, hopefully, a victory lap. The final boss, Gwyn, can be really random with his attacks, but ideally we're just going to be stun locking him with move swap since Gwyn gets staggered with only 2 hits. We'll start the fight with a rolling attack, giving us 1 hit in, and then follow it up with our move swap running attacks, which is 2 hits every time. If we land the rolling attack at the start, then we stagger Gwyn every time on the first hit of our running attack, with the second hit leading into our next stagger. Landing the first rolling attack to set up this stagger method is key because Gwyn's attacks come out super fast and will one-shot us if they land. We have to hit him a lot as well, and we don't roll incredibly fast with Dragon Tooth equipped, so it certainly isn't a free dub. It's worth noting that for the most part, running past all these Black Knights in the Kiln is pretty straightforward. The first 2 near the start can hit you sometimes, so you occasionally have to roll out of the way, but for the rest, it's just running past them in ways that cause them to not really ever hit you, like running to the left of the first knight on these stairs and then to the right of the second one. Here Regole performs a move swap right before entering the Gwyn fight and successfully performs a roll to dodge Gwyn's first attack, and attacks coming out of it, setting us up for a clean fight against Gwyn. We then continually circle around Gwyn, causing him to turn to face us before he can attack, buying us just enough time to regen enough stamina to attack again. As Gwyn's health diminishes, Regole will finish the fight in fashion, where rather than just attacking Gwyn to finish him off, he'll parry and riposte his attack. This, while not only stylish, is faster because it causes Gwyn to die immediately rather than a long drawn out death animation, which overall saves about 5 seconds. In addition to this, boss arenas are unstable ground while the boss is alive, so by quitting out of the game the moment Gwyn dies before the game has a chance to change the arena to stable ground, we respawn at our last stable ground, which is at the fog wall of the arena, which immediately triggers the final cutscene of the game. This marks the official end of the run. So if you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much on behalf of both myself and Regole. Dark Souls speedruns are just an absolute blast and are some of the most thoroughly documented speedruns out there in terms of what has been found. There's an enormous speedrunning community for the game, like seriously, there are usually over 2,000 people online in the community's Discord server at any given moment. If speedruns of any Soulsborne game interest you, then head on over to speedsouls.com for more info. Additionally, I'd like to give a huge shout out and thank you to Regole for his help with making this video. He sat down with me and talked me through the entire run, explaining everything with incredible detail and helped make sure I understood the run well enough to convey it to you all. Regole is a pretty awesome person, and I can't recommend enough that you check out his stuff. Links to his YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter are all in the description. Additionally, he and I have met in person and were both on the couch for Lil Aggie's Sekiro speedrun at AGDQ 2020, which was honestly a blast and is always a fun run to go back and watch, so if you haven't checked that out, then you should watch that as well. I'd also like to take a moment to give a huge thank you to everyone who supports the channel on Patreon. It is absolutely by no means necessary, but over 175 of you choose to continue to do so anyways, which honestly, just thank you. I never thought we'd even come close to that number. We're approaching the 200 patron milestone, which if we cross that, patrons will be able to write in speedruns for a poll to decide a future run to cover in an upcoming Speedrun Explained. Supporting the channel monetarily with Patreon is by no means necessary, but means the world and helps keep the channel afloat. For as little as $1 a month, you get access to updates on what videos are in development, where videos are at in the creation process, access to videos early and without ads, and taking part in things like the aforementioned poll to decide future videos, along with Q&A live streams that we do for every 50 patrons. There's a link in the description if you're interested, and as always, it's by no means necessary, but thank you to all of you who choose to do it anyways. Lastly, if you're someone who likes to use Discord, then hop on over to our Discord server. It's a great place to talk about really anything. You'd think that a Discord server centered around a speedrunning channel on YouTube would be all about speedruns, but really it's just a lot of people talking to each other and seeing how their days have been going and what they've been up to. The people in the server are an incredibly supportive and wholesome group, so if that sounds like a place you want to be, then hop on in, discord.gg/tomatoanus. That's all for this video though. This was an any % speedrun of Dark Souls. I've been tomatoanus, and I hope you have an above average day.